First, it's easy to support President Donald Trump's enthusiasm for stopping the killing in Ukraine, but it's hard to agree with his assessment that Ukraine started it, that President Zelenskyy is a dictator and that he's only continuing it because he's on a gravy train of US financial support. Now, in domestic policy, Trump's had the most consequential start to any presidency in decades, abandoning the net zero madness, ending the gender madness, ending the employment madness where companies hired workers on the basis of every other attribute other than merit, and taking an axe to the profligate government spending with Doge. But when it comes to foreign policy, his judgment is not as sure-footed. Threatening 25% tariffs against Canada and Mexico might have been a negotiating tactic to make them take their border responsibilities seriously, which they seem to have done. But it's hard to see much art of the deal in taking the Russian dictator's side against the Ukrainians, who've literally been fighting for their freedom with their lives, and pretty successfully, you might add, against the odds for almost 3 years. Now, maybe there's a big play here to try and detach Russia from China, which might make sense, but not if it means throwing Ukraine under the bus. Maybe he's trying to force the Europeans to take more responsibility for their own defence, which they should, which they must do, because they've been free riding on America for years. What's hard to take is the spectacle of the Americans and the Russians deciding on the fate of Ukraine without any input whatsoever from the Ukrainians who've been sidelined. In this respect, there's real echoes of the Munich Agreement in 1938, when Chamberlain talked directly to Hitler and then dismembered Czechoslovakia in order to secure peace in our time, which, as history records, lasted barely a year and had the West fighting for its very survival against a nasty regime that was emboldened by the West's weakness. Remember that lesson of history. Weakness is provocative. And any suggestion that we would just roll over to Putin is just that. No, not merely an opportunity that it gives him in Ukraine, but more importantly, the message it then sends to the real danger here, and that's China. Now, I find it hard to imagine that Trump would want to start his presidency by giving Putin the great prize of turning Ukraine into Russian colonies. But still, it's a warning to everyone who's counted on sheltering behind the US alliance that we can't take American help for granted. And that means us too here in Australia, unless we're prepared to do a lot more and spend a lot more on our own defence.